More cloud, line of rain spreading southwards and some heavy rain likely over the Midlands, parts of southern England at times. Some uncertainty about exactly how far east and west that rain is, but as I said, it could be pretty heavy. Quite mild the air though, so temperatures even where it's cloudy and rainy still up to 13, 14 degrees. Western parts seeing some afternoon sunshine developing, just a few showers in the far northwest. The showery rain in the east will linger well into Wednesday evening before it finally heads out into the North Sea. And once that's gone, bar a few showers on Thursday across Scotland and Northern Ireland, most places set fair with plenty of sunshine as we head into the weekend. Goodbye.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome once again to On the Money, where we're focused on the UK's cost of living crisis, helping you to beat the squeeze. I'm Liam Halligan, and for the next hour we'll be talking about jobs and pay. New figures show more of us are in work, but we're getting paid less on average. Real wages after inflation are going down. What does that mean for you? All that after the GB News headlines with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon, it's 1 o'clock. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. The government says a further 350 Russian individuals and entities have been sanctioned following the invasion of Ukraine. The Foreign Secretary Liz Truss says the UK is going further and faster than ever, hitting those closest to the Russian President Vladimir Putin. The Foreign Office said oligarchs sanctioned today have an estimated total wealth of more than £100 billion. Well, President Volodymyr Zelensky warned Western leaders sanctions aren't enough to end the war. Speaking via video link at a meeting of Northern European leaders, he urged them to protect their own security by helping Ukraine defend itself by supplying more weapons.
You know the kind of weapon we need, everyone knows. You know what kind of defense measures we need. Sanctions are not enough, although we're very grateful for that. So the aggressive plans of Russia has not yet collapsed, and it is understandable why, because the world is silent after 2 nuclear power plants were captured. We're just hearing words, and that's not enough.
Boris Johnson promised to try to do more to tighten sanctions on Russian banks and to protect Ukrainian civilians.
This is a desperate moment, and I think we must try to do more, particularly to support you in protecting the Ukrainian people from bombardment by artillery and by aviation.
The mayor of Ukraine's capital says there'll be a 35-hour curfew in Kyiv from this evening, lasting until Thursday morning. Vitaly Klitschko's announcement follows large explosions overnight, leaving 2 people dead and residential buildings heavily damaged. Peace negotiations between Moscow and Kyiv have resumed today after being paused yesterday. Russian prosecutors are looking to move the Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny to a maximum security prison. They've also asked a court to hand Navalny an additional 13 years of jail time for fraud and contempt of court charges. He's already serving a 2.5-year sentence at a prison camp in Moscow for parole violations. The UN has urged authorities to ensure the journalist who interrupted a live news broadcast on Russian state television is not punished. It's the Channel 1 editor, Marina Osyanikova, who ran onto the set of the network's live nightly news show last night with a sign reading, "Don't believe propaganda, they're lying to you." The Kremlin described her actions as hooliganism. In some other news now, Frankie Smith, the mother of the murdered toddler Star Hobson, has had her prison sentence increased to 12 years at the Court of Appeal today. The 20-year-old was originally jailed for 8 years in December for her role in the murder of the 16-month-old daughter, who was killed by her former partner, Savannah Brockhill. The British-Iranian national Nazanin Zahawi-Ratcliffe has had her British passport returned to her. It's according to the Labour MP Tulip Siddiq, who tweeted that Nazanin is still at her family home in Tehran and there is a British negotiation team with her. Ms Zahawi-Ratcliffe has been detained in Iran since her arrest in 2016 on charges of plotting to overthrow the government, allegations she has always denied. Detectives investigating the murder of the Northern Ireland journalist Lyra McKee have arrested 5 men. The men aged between 20 and 54 were arrested in Londonderry this morning under the Terrorism Act. Ms McKee was killed in the city in April 2019 as she observed rioting in the Cregan area. An extremist group styling itself as the new IRA had previously claimed it was responsible. The number of unemployed people in the UK has dropped below pre-pandemic levels for the first time. Office for National Statistics figures show 29.7 million UK workers are on payroll as of February. That is a record high, but earnings continue to fall behind inflation. Average weekly wages, for example, are down 1.6% compared with the year earlier. HSBC has announced they're closing 69 of their branches in the UK. The group say it's due to the shift to online banking, which they say has been accelerated by the pandemic. It's set to affect around 400 staff members overall. You're up to date now on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now, let's return to Liam for today's On the Money.
Coming up on The Money today, the good news is that more of us have jobs. The bad, we're getting paid less once you account for inflation. Pay is rising, but prices are rising even more, which means real wages are going down, with millions of UK households now feeling that cost of living squeeze. But it's not all doom and gloom. We hear from the man who runs Brompton, the company behind the famous fold-up bikes. They're opening a new factory in Kent, creating hundreds of jobs. Plus, each day on The Money features an in-depth Money Talks interview with a business leader or policymaker. Well, today we're talking to Justin Floyd, serial entrepreneur and investor in technology whose products and services are helping to tackle global supply chain crunches that have come to the fore since the COVID pandemic. Above all, I want to hear from you. Are you feeling the cost of living squeeze? What are your experiences and concerns? Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet @GBNews. I want to know all about your efforts to make ends meet, putting GB News front and centre of this show. So stay with us. This is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and you're on The Money. We start today's On The Money with some good news. The number of workers with a job and on payroll in the UK has jumped to a new record, with unemployment also falling. As the cost of living squeeze tightens, though, new figures confirm that wages are growing more slowly than prices. So what we're being paid on average is failing to keep up with inflation, and that means UK living standards are going down. New data out today shows the number of paid employees rose by 275,000 in February. There are now 29.7 million people employed across the UK. As such, unemployment has fallen to 3.9%, lower than before the pandemic. Having said all that, average wages rose just 3.8% during the year to January. Inflation, the rise in the cost of living, was 5.5% during the same period. So after inflation, wages are falling. This is the biggest drop in real or post-inflation wages since 2014. At the start of this year, On the Money warned that inflation was set to rise, eroding living standards for millions of workers. Well, inflation's now at a 30-year high, and that's figures that were published before the Russia-Ukraine conflict, which of course is causing fuel and food prices to spiral even more. It strikes me that Britain, both economically and politically, is at a turning point not dissimilar to when I was a kid in the late 1970s. Back then, high inflation caused real wages to fall, with trade unions taking widespread strike action. Pickets stood outside factories, and rubbish went uncollected in the streets as refuse collectors refused to work, causing a sense of national dismay and outrage. While around half the UK workforce was in a trade union back in the 70s, that's fallen to just a quarter today. Unions, though, remain extremely strong across the public sector, including teachers, NHS workers and firefighters. Next Wednesday, the 23rd of March, Rishi Sunak's delivering his spring statement to the House of Commons. And as living standards fall, the Chancellor's under intense pressure from both Labour and Tory backbenchers to do more to help support cash-strapped families. And ominously, and a hark back to the 70s, some lorry drivers are now taking industrial action, as are the bin men. Strikes by refuse collectors just hit a 40-year high. And that's our On the Money question today. Will falling real wages spark widespread industrial action? Well, here at On the Money, we have grown-up discussions with people who really know their stuff. Talking of which, Tony Wilson's back on the show. He's the director of the Institute for Employment Studies. We also have one of Britain's leading economists, Jonathan Portes, Professor of Economics at King's College London and a former chief economist at the Cabinet Office under Gordon Brown. Joining me in the studio is Richard Hunter, who's head of markets at Interactive Investor. Jonathan Portes, let's go to you first. Just outline briefly these labour market and earnings statistics that came out today, showing, of course, unemployment down, but real wages down as well.
Yes, so you have this very interesting juncture in the job market, as you described, which is that employment is doing quite well. As you say, payrolls are at a record level, although the level of employment is still significantly down on what it was before the pandemic, because self-employment has fallen. And we shouldn't forget that. It's not the case that there are more, despite what the Prime Minister keeps on saying, it just isn't the case that there are more people in work than there were before the pandemic. There are fewer people in work. But the job market has recovered well, and there is a record level of vacancies. There are plenty of jobs out there for people to get. On the other hand, as you said, wages have come under severe pressure because of the rise in wages has not matched the rise in inflation. And today's figures showed that real wages on average are falling, although some of us have done quite well. There was a big rise in bonuses at the end of the year, which looked like they went mostly to people in the financial sector. But across the rest of the spectrum, wages don't seem to be doing that well, whereas inflation, of course, is rising quite fast, and that and all this. It's important to remember everything that we've said today really predates the impact of the Ukraine crisis, which is going to be felt overwhelmingly in energy prices, but also perhaps in food prices.
Beautifully summarised there by Professor Portes. Tony Wilson, let's go to you. I'm always conscious when we discuss these aggregate national macro numbers, as we economists call them. It's a mixed picture across the UK. Yes, there's a record number of vacancies. Yes, unemployment is at a pre-pandemic low. On the other hand, there are parts of the country where there isn't work. There are parts of the country where the notion that there are lots of job vacancies sounds like a bad joke.
Well, that's definitely the case, Liam. There's parts of the country where we have lower vacancies and higher, relatively higher unemployment. We'll actually have some work out on this in the next couple of weeks, which will be illustrating this point with the Local Government Association looking in particular at some of those differences by areas. And actually many of those areas that are struggling post-crisis are the ones that were struggling before the crisis as well, particularly ex-industrial areas, some inner city areas and some coastal towns, relatively deprived coastal towns. But having said that, the growth in vacancies has been pretty broad-based. I mean, it's been across industries, and because of the nature of the pandemic, it particularly hit self-employment and private sector employment hard. It particularly hit relatively more prosperous areas harder in terms of job losses. Some of those regional effects haven't been as bad as they might have been. The one thing I would say, though, is that nonetheless there are some groups who are definitely doing a lot worse, and in particular older people. I mean, one of the standout facts in today's data is this really precipitous decline in labour force participation amongst people aged over 50.
Yeah.
So we've actually had a rise of more than 500,000 in the number of older people who are not in work and not looking for work since the pandemic began. There's nearly 600,000 fewer older people in the labour force, and these are people who are actually actively, who are not looking for work and not working anymore. And this worries me because we've got
And that's flattering the unemployment number, isn't it? That's making the unemployment number look lower than it really is, because it's a percentage of a smaller number of people, because more people, as you say, have actually left the workforce. Oh, Tony Wilson's frozen. We'll come back to Tony. Richard, let's turn to you. If I may say so, sir, you're like me, a child of the 70s. I talked about the 70s in my introduction. We remember as kids lots of strike action that was really driven by inflation. People's living standards were being eroded. It's no wonder lots of people went on strike. Could we see a repeat of that?
Well, there are similarities, as you mentioned in your introduction. The oil crisis, of course, in the mid-70s was a cause of much discontent. On the other hand, of course, as you also said, there's much less union participation than there was at that time. And that last point that we've heard is particularly fascinating, that there's a significant number of people, and we've been seeing this in the States as well, choosing not to work.
Yeah.
Mainly for lifestyle reasons. They've had a chance over the last 2 years of the pandemic and lockdowns just to step back and say, what do I really want? Could I afford to retire? I'm in no big rush. And of course, that in turn could be inflationary if employees have got to be paid more to be enticed back into the workplace.
Let's turn back to Professor Jonathan Portes. Jonathan, you'll remember the 70s and the 80s like myself, and Richard, if I may say so. Of course, there's less trade union membership. It's about a quarter of the workforce now rather than a half, which it was when we were kids. But the quarter of the workforce that is unionised, it's largely in the public sector. And I think we can agree, can't we, that a lot of the public sector unions aren't going to take falling living standards, inflation rising faster than wages lying down.
I think that's right. So I think you'll see a mixture of unions protesting against their members' real wages being cut, because and this is a key choice for the Chancellor in next week's budget, right? He set his spending plans at a time when inflation was forecast to be much, much lower than it was now. So in other words, those spending plans assume pay rises for nurses, teachers, local government workers, social care workers, and so on, that are much lower than inflation. Big real terms pay cuts for those groups. So we can either stick to those spending figures and inflict those big pay cuts, risking, as you say, the sort of industrial disruption that might result, or disruption to public services, or he can try and find the money from somewhere. What I would say, though, is we shouldn't forget the private sector, even though, as you say, unions are much less of a presence there. I actually have some research out later this week with Total Jobs, one of the big online recruitment, looking at what people are saying. And lots of people in the private sector are thinking about, and the public sector are thinking not necessarily about strike action in order to keep their living standards, but about moving jobs or moving sectors. because, of course, there are all those vacancies out there. So the option not of, if your employer says, I'm not giving you an inflation pay rise that keeps up with inflation, you have one option may be to go on strike, but actually a much easier option in today's labour market for many people may be to say, well, actually, I can get a better job, a better pay, a better job offer from another company, or perhaps I can increase my pay by switching sector. So that is that may be a big factor too. Is this sort of workers using the this relatively buoyant labour market as leverage to extract bigger pay increases, either directly or just by quitting and getting a better job.
Tony Wilson, we've got you back. Apologies there for the communications issue. We've got the Chancellor's spring statement on the 23rd of March. A new inflation figure will come out on that day as well. The minimum wage is going up, we know, from April. That's not the government spending money. Well, the government will have to spend some money in the public sector, upping those minimum wages to £9.50, but that falls mainly on the private sector. What's your best guess, Tony Wilson, putting you on the spot? What do you think Rishi Sunak will do to help hard-pressed families as living standards slide?
Well, I fear that what he may do, what he will do and what he needs to do might be two different things, unfortunately. I think we do need action in three areas, really. First, we do definitely need to do more to support incomes for people on low incomes. I mean, the people who lose out the most when inflation rises are people who don't have a job at all. And so falls in real earnings are one thing, falls in real rates of benefits are something else. And universal credit is going to increase by 3%. Inflation's increasing, by 6-7%. One would think by the summer, probably by more than that. So I think he should bring forward what will end up being a large increase in universal credit next year because of the way it's calculated to this year. It won't cost him anything to do that in the long run, but I think that would be sensible. The second thing is more employment support for people out of work, and particularly for people aged over 50. And I think the third would be to try to work much better with employers around how we can try to support better quality employment, better job design, more inclusive recruitment, the things that would actually help, and of course help firms to do more to raise productivity and then be able to boost pay. I do worry that the government have largely left employers to their own devices on this, and I think government would do well to kind of try to stay out of the way of how employers run their businesses. But we can certainly do more to try to support firms and work with organisations that can support firms to do better on employment and do better on supporting productivity growth, and in particular supporting groups who are in low paid work to get into better paid work. So let's see. Hopefully, we'll have action in a few areas.
Well put. Richard, turning finally to you for this part of the show, what's your best guess in terms of what Rishi Sunak's going to do? Tony Wilson just there talked about employer costs. There's this increase in employer national insurance as well as employee national insurance. Might the Chancellor scrap it? He could blame it on the Russia-Ukraine conflict.
He could, and I think we were speaking quite recently just to say that there is little debate as to the fact that much of the largesse that was shown during the height of the pandemic needs to be repaid at some point. Of course it does. The question, of course, is whether it needs to be repaid right now. Things have changed since the pandemic, not least of which the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, the spike in energy, metal, food prices and so on, and the cost of living crisis, although it was very much on the horizon just a few months ago, is now pretty much on a doorstep.
Rich, you're going to stay with us. This is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. It's 1:20 after the break. While fuel prices hit new highs, the price of oil has actually come down in recent days. We'll discuss why. And your emails are flooding in thick and fast on inflation, pay and much more. We'll read some of those shortly. Thank you to Jonathan Portes and to Tony Wilson for joining me. Stay with us. You're On the Money.
Hello there. A fine day today across much of the UK. Bright, sunny skies, pretty mild as well by this afternoon after a chilly old start. There is some rain, however, across the northwest. That's from this weather front that's just eking slowly towards the UK. There's another warm front in the south, and that is going to bring some warmer air later in the week, but also some rain tomorrow across parts of eastern England. For today, though, as I said, for the vast majority, dry, fine, hazy sunshine out there. The cloud is increasing across Scotland and Northern Ireland. We do have some rain trickling into the west of Northern Ireland, the Highlands, the Western Isles and the Northern Isles of Scotland. The breeze picking up here as well. Temperatures, even where it stays dry across Scotland, Northern Ireland, 9-10 degrees. But for England and Wales, the teens quite widely, and maybe up as high as 16, possibly even 17 degrees across parts of the east. Much of England and Wales staying dry and fine through this evening, but the rain will spread through Belfast, through the central belt of Scotland as well, so turning quite damp here overnight. Some mist and fog is likely across the south. Temperatures holding up at 6, 7, 8 degrees Celsius. It will turn colder as the skies start to clear in the northwest later on. And a brighter day here to come tomorrow, although we could start with a touch of frost and certainly some fog for Northern Ireland. A different day for England and Wales, much more cloud, line of rain spreading southwards and some heavy rain likely over the Midlands, parts of southern England at times. Some uncertainty about exactly how far east and west that rain is, but as I said, it could be pretty heavy. Quite mild the air though, so temperatures even where it's cloudy and rainy still up to 13, 14 degrees. Western parts seeing some afternoon sunshine developing, just a few showers in the far northwest. The showery rain in the east will linger well into Wednesday evening before it finally heads out into the North Sea. And once that's gone, bar a few showers on Thursday across Scotland and Northern Ireland, most places set fair with plenty of sunshine as we head into the weekend. Goodbye.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 1:25. You're on the money with me, Liam Halligan, on GB News TV, DAB, plus digital radio and online. Now, we've regularly reported the rise and fall of oil prices, which of course impacts the cost of diesel and petrol. Oil hit $130 a barrel last week, up from $70 back in December. But over recent days, the price of oil's fallen to just over $100 a barrel, back quite a lot. So what's behind this price drop and what does it mean for us? Well, I'm delighted to say we're joined by fuel price analyst at Argus Media, Thomas Warner. Thanks for joining us, Thomas. And with me still in the studio is Head of Markets Interactive Investor, Richard Hunter. Thomas, let's go to you. The oil price has fallen back quite a bit. It touched $138 at one point earlier this month, the highest since 2008. Now it's come back quite a bit to just over $100 when I last looked this lunchtime. Why is that?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on, Liam. It's great to be here with you. Why has the price fallen back? Well, a lot of it is because essentially when the problems in Ukraine started to escalate, the markets reacted quite reasonably by panicking. So the oil price rocketed because people were concerned about the future of Russian supply. But as the situation has developed, it's become more clear that oil from Russia is still making its way into the international system. And there have been efforts by the US and others to try to lobby other producing countries to increase their production to make up for any potential shortfall. And we're also seeing that industrial output in China is coming under a little bit of pressure at the moment because they're having a spike in their COVID rates. So a few factors coming together to take some of that inflationary pressure off crude prices at least.
Richard Hunter, it's hard to overstress, isn't it, how important the oil price is to the global economy. It's not just petrol and diesel for your car or van, it's the creation of plastics, it's all kinds of chemical processes. It's, oil and gas together may use fertiliser, massively important in the price of food. Thomas Warner touched on a really interesting point there. Yes, it's good news for an oil importer like the UK that the price is coming down, but that's partly because China is approaching an industrial go slow, the biggest energy exporter in the world, because they've had a spike in COVID.
They very much have had a spike, and more latterly, certainly in terms of over the last day or so, we've heard about the supply factors which are feeding into the dropping oil price. Now we're talking about demand. We've seen it across the mining sector in terms of other metals, where if you're going to get a situation where potentially the Chinese economy could even flatline in the first quarter, then clearly demand is going to go down. So yes,
so no growth at all in China potentially.
Potentially, and that's another reason that the oil price has taken something of a dive today. Just to put it in context, however, even after today's fall, the Brent crude price remains up by about 28% in the year to date. So we're still much higher than where we were.
So from the beginning of January to now, Brent crude, that's the price of oil in this part of the world, because it's benchmarked off the Brent oil field in the North Sea. That's still up 28%. That sounds pretty inflationary to me. Thomas Warner, let's go back to you. It strikes me that the UK is now, and the Western world in general, it's searching around for oil to replace the 7 million or so barrels a day that Russia sells on global markets. We're talking to the Saudis. Boris Johnson's on his way there tonight. We're talking to the Iranians. Maybe the oil embargo on Iran could be lifted. Do you think we're going to get there? Do you think oil is going to normalise and go back to where it was in December at $70 a barrel, which was already pretty high, but nowhere near where we currently are?
It would be surprising, I think, for it to get back as low as $70 a barrel. But I think it's important to stress that the reduction in supply from Russia has not been as significant as I think the initial price shock would have suggested, because a lot of companies have undertaken not to conduct any further business with Russian companies. But that doesn't preclude the loading of long-term supply agreements. So there's more than half, at least, of all of Russia's crude is still finding a home, and so the overall shock is not quite so significant. Globally, the fundamentals are very strong for oil to be well north of $70 a barrel. And that's because we have this slightly lopsided COVID recovery. There are a lot of economies, China put to one side, which are recovering very, very well indeed. And it's very hard for refiners all around the world and especially in Europe, to match that increasing demand for products because the cost of natural gas is so high, and that natural gas feeds into the cost of refining new products. So I think we're going to see tight supply of product and therefore high prices for the foreseeable future, albeit not at the levels that people are paying at the pumps this week.
Very, very interesting. Thomas said there that a lot of the Russian crude that's meant to be sanctioned is actually finding a home on global markets. Of course, it's not sanctioned in China. The UK, the EU, we're still using Russian gas, even though the Americans are saying that they're not, and yet still we're north of $100 a barrel.
Yes, and of course it's had quite the year and a half, the oil price, in terms of the price we were seeing on the futures market. Obviously, it got down to pretty much down to zero. And a lot of the oil majors had to get to the stage where they either divested of some of their non-core assets, generally bore down on prices to the extent where you've got the likes of BP and Shell, for example, saying that they break even at, let's say, $45 to $50 a barrel. Because in the old days, it used to be that unless the oil price was high, it wasn't worth getting it out of the ground. So there's that dynamic always in play as well.
Lots of doubt, but one thing's for sure, Richard, even though prices have come down in the last couple of days, we're not going to see petrol or diesel prices fall on the forecourt, are we?
Not immediately.
Why is that? It's always the same, isn't it? It's always the same. When oil prices go up, petrol and diesel goes up. When oil prices come down, petrol and diesel doesn't come down. Richard Hunter, thank you very much indeed for joining me.
Pleasure.
Of Interactive Investor, and Thomas Warner of Argus Media. Thank you so much for joining us. We much appreciate it. Thanks to my guests today. This is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. Coming up, today's Money Talks interview is with Justin Floyd, who's a pioneering investor in technology and whose products and services are helping to tackle those global supply chain crunches that have come to the fore since the COVID pandemic. But first, the GB News headlines once more with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon, it's 1:32. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. The government says a further 350 Russian individuals and entities have been sanctioned following the invasion of Ukraine. The Foreign Secretary Liz Truss says the UK is going further and faster than ever, hitting those closest to the Russian President Vladimir Putin. The Foreign Office said oligarchs sanctioned today have an estimated total wealth of more than £100 billion. It's after President Volodymyr Zelensky warned Western leaders sanctions aren't enough to end the war. The mayor of Ukraine's capital says there'll be a 35-hour curfew in Kyiv from this evening, lasting until Thursday morning. Vitaly Klitschko's announcement follows large explosions overnight that left 2 people dead and residential buildings heavily damaged. Peace negotiations between Moscow and Kyiv are currently underway. Earlier today, the Belarusian president, Alexander Lukashenko, said his country would resist what he called attempts to draw it into the conflict across the border. Russian prosecutors are reportedly looking to move Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny to a maximum security prison. They've also asked a court to hand Navalny an additional 13 years jail time for fraud and contempt of court charges. He's already serving a 2.5-year sentence at a prison camp in Moscow for parole violations. In some other news now, British Iranian aid worker Nazanin Zahawi-Ratcliffe has had her British passport returned to her. That's according to the Labour MP Tulip Siddiq, who tweeted that she's still at her family home in Tehran and that there's a British negotiation team with her. The Prime Minister said talks are still ongoing.
I don't want to tempt fate, but clearly the negotiations about all our difficult consular cases have been going on for a long time, and really I think it would not be sensible for me to comment until we've got a final result. And I think that conversations are still going on.
You're now up to date on GB News. We're on your TV, online and DAB+ radio. Shortly, we'll be back to On the Money with Liam.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back, and you are on the money. Well, it's time now for my daily interview series, Money Talks. And today I'm joined by Justin Floyd. He's the CEO and co-founder of Red Cloud. That's a technology business that's developed a so-called open commerce platform, helping companies buy and sell more easily, easing those supply chain issues which have come to the fore in the aftermath of the COVID pandemic. Justin has decades of experience building and scaling enterprises and consumer technology companies across the globe. And here he is, it's Justin Floyd in the studio, my latest guest on Money Talks. Justin, welcome to Money Talks. Great to have you in the studio. What is this open commerce platform that you've developed? Why is it different from, say, eBay?
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you, Liam, for having me on. Open commerce is different because there's a $32 trillion distribution problem in the world today that exists. Right?
32,000 billion.
So, yeah,
big money.
Exactly, it's huge money, and that's where most of the world. So take where you got your coffee from, for example, this morning. You probably went to Starbucks or wherever, where those coffee beans come from, right the way through to nappies, through to any kind of high volume, low margin, high velocity, low margin products, the stuff that we consume on a day-to-day basis. That's a $32 trillion marketplace. Pretty much most of that business is done offline today. So it's not done through the internet, it's not done through any kind of electronic commerce, or the electronic commerce that's used is outdated technology from 20, 30, 40 years ago. This is particularly a problem across developing markets. So where 80% of the world's population...
The poorer countries, Africa, Latin America, parts of Asia.
Absolutely. They're probably about to become the richer countries, actually,
of course,
under the current circumstances, but that's a different problem. So across those markets where pretty much almost any consumable item is consumed, there is a big supply chain problem. There's a massive problem with distribution. Technology that's being used is based from the 1960s and 1970s. So we built the concept around open commerce around the idea that actually anybody, any kind of small businesses should be able to trade instantly with any brand and to be able to sell and trade and buy those products online in a much easier way than they can do today. And in particularly the payments infrastructure that sits behind that across emerging markets, even across America, places like that, horribly outdated, kind of horribly inefficient, very expensive to use, which is why a lot of people kind of don't use this kind of concept of being able to trade electronically with each other today.
So in a nutshell, if I may, readers, viewers, listeners that have heard of Red Cloud, you might have read about you in the papers and so on. We know about eBay and we know about Amazon, sort of customer facing, but the so-called B2B, business to business trading, it's not as online as the B2C, the business to consumer trading that we all experience in our everyday lives. And what you're trying to do with Red Cloud, a British company, and you're a Brit, you are trying to enhance sort of internet trading sort of between companies across the Western world, but across the emerging markets, the developing world too. That sounds like a big undertaking.
It's a huge undertaking. I mean, I had this vision, kind of 15 years ago, and it's only really now that the concept of decentralization is something you hear about a lot, whether it's kind of to do with blockchain or cryptocurrency or whatever. But this concept of decentralization, and the problems with the kind of big platforms today, the Web 2.0, so Amazon, eBay, PayPal, kind of Google, all these organizations, these are deeply centralized platforms. And they make it very difficult.
So you're trying to sort of democratize commerce on the internet.
Absolutely.
So you don't have to go through an Amazon or an eBay or the really big guys who take a little cut.
Well, they take a big cut. Amazon, 30% gig, right? I mean, that's an expensive, for any kind of seller on Amazon, 30% of...
Oh, they won't like you, the tech giants. What, do you get a nice welcome when you come to Silicon Valley? Do you get invited to the parties? Probably not.
I spent a decade out in Silicon Valley, and they're not going to be inviting me back anytime soon. No, they see me as the great traitor. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are absolutely taking a stand against those kinds of platforms. Yeah, we strongly believe now is the time to create. And you can see what's going on in the world today. You know, the difficulties across supply chains, the difficulties in whether it's moving money, the difficulties in terms of trading relationships that are absolutely critical for the food that appears on you or and I's table today. Without those trading relationships working in a far more autonomous and digital way, it's going to absolutely really affect that kind of, you know, the kind of way in which we access those kinds of products. No question.
So you're battling the tech giants. You're giving the big platforms a run for their money. I assume that you'll take a smaller cut and try and be more competitive. And I'm sure there are other people trying to do what you're trying to do. Now you talk about it, it seems so obvious. What's your background, Justin? How did you get into this kind of space, as we must say? How did you get into becoming a kind of tech guru and a business leader?
Well, I was very fortunate. I got expelled from school because I actually
so many of my money talks guess. Oh, I got expelled from school. Oh, I had a fight with my teacher.
It really helps you in many ways, right? And
I'll bear it in mind. I give my son some advice.
Well, it kind of, you know, how shall I describe it? Focuses your life choices. And so my life choice was either set up my own business or kind of, you know, not maybe.
I've got to ask you, why did you get expelled? Just briefly. This is a family show. Briefly.
Well, actually, I was trading products in my school. Let's put it.
All right, okay, go on then. All right, we'll gloss over that because I'm sure your lawyers are listening.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, so you got expelled from school. Were you into computers anyway? Were you a bit of a nerd?
Yeah, not so much of a nerd, but I understood the value of technology at a very early stage. I was using technology to kind of do reading, writing, and all that kind of stuff. So I saw the value of technology, and so I built out businesses off the back of that. I was very fortunate. My first company, I was able to sell it, made a bit of money, and from there on in, I kind of scaled and built two or three very big kind of tech companies. Then I got into a bit of investing, did a bit of kind of venture capital stuff. I absolutely hated that, so I came back into the, you know, let's kind
more
of
creative stuff.
Build. Yeah.
That's the thing. If you can start a business and sell it and create a bit of money, that gives you a buffer. Yeah. You know, you can sort of survive. You can pay your bills. You're not going to be completely on the breadline.
Absolutely.
And then that gives you the scope to be a bit more entrepreneurial, doesn't it? Nice position if you can get to there. What's your advice to budding entrepreneurs? We know a lot of our listeners, a lot of our viewers do want to start their own business. What would you tell them?
Stay in lane. So when you decide what you want to do, you just focus in on that and nothing else, and don't chop and change and say, hey, 1 minute I want to be a kind of, you know, food blogger, and the next minute I decide I want to build software, and the next minute I want to kind of become, you know, cure for, you know, the kind of, you know, the difficulties of climate change. When you figure out exactly what the problem is that you're trying to solve, then you build the product around that. A lot of people, unfortunately, build a product first, and then they try and figure out what the problem is they're going to solve off the back end of that, right? Yeah. So that would be my advice.
So the tech giants, it's a big cultural issue, this. It's obviously a big economic issue, a big regulatory issue. A lot of people are feeling now they're too powerful. They're too powerful politically. They have too much say on our national debate. They often don't pay a lot of tax in the jurisdictions where they should be. Do you think they're too close to businesses, particularly in the Western world? Do you think businesses, politicians and the tech giants are a bit too cosy?
Oh, yeah, no question. I mean, Amazon have got literally thousands of lobbyists on their payroll out in Washington, right? Which actually totally dictates. I mean, that's why Amazon is still existing with the power base that they are. Yeah, there's no question about that. And it's desperate that change is needed. I don't think anyone should...
How about here? Amazon, of course, deny wrongdoing, we should say, and I know you'd want me to say that. But how about here? Are the tech giants too powerful here in the UK? Because we're not the US, but we are the tech hub of Europe, right? We are a serious player. The fact that people like you are knocking about and doing what you're doing, and it's not just you, huge amount of direct investment coming into not just London, up on Teesside.
Absolutely.
Bournemouth, Cardiff, Manchester, there are big tech scenes now.
Absolutely.
Are the tech giants too powerful here?
Yes, no question. I mean, when you look at kind of the so-called value that they bring to the British economy, it's pervasive and persuasive, right? I mean, if you're a politician and you've got Facebook saying, you know what, we're going to employ 10,000 people in London, kind of what are you going to say? Okay, thank you very much indeed. That's a great idea. What do you need me to do to help you do that? And so, yes, they've got far too much cash, far too much power, and way too much kind of invasiveness in the way in which kind of commerce and society is working at the moment. And I think this whole Web 3.0 and decentralization and some of the things that you're really seeing to come to fruition now will finally right-size that position.
Competition, right? Competition.
Yeah, because no longer you and I will be the product. Today we're the product, right? When we use the internet, we are the product.
Yeah.
These guys feed off our data. That's how they're able
Surveillance capitalism, they call it.
Yeah, I like it.
Surveillance capitalism.
I like that.
So here's a question. You spent time in Silicon Valley. You're sitting here as a tech guru. You got your online stuff happening. Should we do more to help high street? Should we do more to help shops, physical shops, people going in, eyeballing someone else? How are you? I'm fine. Say hello to your mum for me. We're in danger of losing that, aren't we? We're in danger of the UK high street completely withering on the vine. How can we stop that happening?
Very much so. I agree. I mean, we absolutely have to invest in tech and commerce companies that are targeting that space and are actually trying to liberate retail to move on to the next level. I mean, retailers have got their challenges and problems and so on and so forth. But I mean, I was in a town on Saturday, I think it was Stratford, and literally, I mean,
Warwickshire, very nice.
Yeah, beautiful place, right? But you know,
called Shakespeare used to live.
Yeah, I had a picture taken next to his statue. It was wonderful, and a great admirer of his as well. But you know, every kind of 4 or 5 doors there was a charity shop, and you know, a sandwich shop or a coffee shop.
Of course, landlords put a charity shop in there because then they don't have to pay business rates, right? That's why you got so many charity shops. Not that we don't need some charity shops, but they're pervasive now, aren't they? They're everywhere.
Very much so. And we're sucking the energy, the vitality, and most importantly, you know, we're sucking the kind of progress of commerce in those kinds of environments. You know, people want to socially interact, especially post-COVID, yeah? You want to go and buy something. You want to be in person.
It's an experience. Go shopping with your mates. I mean, go and meet people on the high street.
Absolutely.
Interact as humans.
I mean, did you get excited the last time you went on a shopping experience with Amazon?
No, I didn't. So here you are. There's the big headline. Justin Floyd, CEO of tech giant to be, and you're saying we need to do more to help the British high street.
Absolutely.
Justin, it's been fun. Really enjoyed it.
Really enjoyed
Stay
it
in
too.
touch and we'll see how you go with your business.
Great show, by the way.
Thank you very much. Stay where you are.
Oh, sorry.
Justin Floyd there of Red Cloud. See, he dislikes me so much he's trying to get away, but that's fine. He's my latest guest on Money Talks, and you can listen to many more of my Money Talks interviews on the Money Talks podcast or the GB News app. Now, small, compact and convenient. Brompton bikes are every commuter's dream, particularly in big cities like London. But the folding bike maker has new plans to build a new headquarters and factory away from the capital for the first time. The new site set to cross 100 acres of unused wetland in Ashford in Kent, and it could create around 1,500 jobs. Our South East reporter Ellie Costello went to meet Brompton's CEO, Will Butler-Adams. She asked him what inspired his new HQ.
Always wanted to build our own home, to have something where we have space to grow. So we looked around London and we needed to stay in London because this is where our staff are from. And also, London is basically why we have the Brompton. It's because of London. It's needed in London. You know, if you live in the middle of the countryside, you don't need a folding bike. So that's always been our ambition. But post-COVID, I mean, rents for this type of stuff are going through the roof. So we are at a point where now it's not possible for us to continue to grow at the size we are in London.
So you talk about the importance of London, and that's where your staff are from. Why then move the factory to Ashford, to one of the home counties?
Amazingly, and it wasn't sort of front and centre of our mind, Ashford came to us, we met them, and we're like, hold on, here's Ashford, half an hour by train from London. People don't need to work in the office every day anymore, so we can still reach in and get that cool, interesting London talent. They can come out to our cool factory 2 days a week, and then the people that are a bit older, they've been with us for a longer period of time, they start having a family, guess what? We lose people here in Greenford, because if they have a couple of children, you suddenly find, well, it's like 400 grand for a tiddly little flat. Well, maybe they can move out of London and actually 400 grand, you can get yourself a 3-bedroom semi in Ashford and have a better quality of life. So it still gives us that really important connection to London. It's a very good connection from Ashford to London, and it gives us the opportunity for our staff potentially to have more affordable housing. And it's on the railway line going to Paris. going to Brussels, because we're furiously international. We export all over the world, and that connection into Europe is really important.
How long is that move going to take from Greenford to Ashford, and will you be expecting your staff to go with you?
I mean, this is lofty ambition stuff, but we hope to open the new factory in Ashford in about 5 years' time. Then we'll have a 5-year transition where we keep both sites running. So there'll be, I mean, really, it's 10 years before this place finishes. So most people aren't in a job for 10 years, not in today's world. So everyone's got loads of time. We have phenomenally loyal staff, and there will be tons of opportunity and tons of time for move. And it's not going to be a sort of drop dead one day to the next. You'd have to make your decision. It'll be over a long period of time. We've gone to Ashford, not just because it's got the talent in London, that's one part, but it has phenomenal talent right there and in Kent. So there's huge opportunity to bring in that talent, and we're working with local academies and the local university to think forward and try and think, well, what talent might we need, and can we do work on the degree course to start preparing that talent for when we arrive.
Tell us about the design of the new Ashford factory, because it's very futuristic, isn't it? There's an emphasis on sustainability, isn't there?
It's going to be a very, very smart Industry 4.0, fully automated facility. What we want is a site that has the flexibility to grow and evolve with us over the next 10, 20, 30 years. So at the moment we're doing about 80,000 out of this factory, and we have room for growth. If we get Ashford up and running, we should be, between the two sites, have the capacity for about 300,000. But we've got a way to go yet.
It's a huge growth for the company. What is the future for Brompton?
Just get on your bike. Get on your electric bike. Don't bring in a flipping Tesla that weighs 2 tons to drag you around. Bring in a bicycle that weighs 12 kilos to move you around. That's a much more efficient electric transport system than a 2,000 kilo chunk of metal. There's tons of carbon in that. So, and that flick of the switch, not just in the UK, in Europe, in North America, in Japan, in South Korea, is happening. An investment and rethinking of cities is coming. So it's a pretty exciting time for us.
I told you it wasn't all doom and gloom. Ellie Costello there, our South East of England reporter, talking to Will Butler-Adams, the man behind those Brompton folding bicycles. You've been sending me your emails throughout the show today. Let's have a look at some of them. Neil wrote GBViews at gbnews.uk to say, I lost my job at the beginning of 2021 and I've been unable to find another one that's suitable and reasonably paid. I have savings, so apparently I can't get any support and I continue to burn through my savings, which is incredibly disappointing and worrying. Lisa contacted us to say there may be more people in jobs, but we're now treated really badly. I work for a very popular high street store, says Lisa, and I'm still waiting to be paid overtime and petrol from December. There's been no heating all winter and no cleaner. The government needs to ensure employers treat employees better. And finally, Malcolm contacted us to say everyone appears to have forgotten pensioners' income. My state pension and another pension are both only going up by 3.1% in April 2022. Even council tax going up by more than 4%. And my gas suppliers just put my direct debit up by 30 quid a month. So I'm going to be very much worse off this year. Thanks a lot for joining me here on GB News. I'll be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. This is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and that was On the Money.
Hello there. A fine day today across much of the UK. Bright, sunny skies, pretty mild as well by this afternoon after a chilly old start. There is some rain, however, across the northwest. That's from this weather front that's just eking slowly towards the UK. There's another warm front in the south, and that is going to bring some warmer air later in the week, but also some rain tomorrow across parts of eastern England. For today, though, as I said, for the vast majority, dry, fine, hazy sunshine out there. The cloud is increasing across Scotland and Northern Ireland. We do have some rain trickling into the west of Northern Ireland, the Highlands, the Western Isles and the Northern Isles of Scotland. The breeze picking up here as well. Temperatures, even where it stays dry across Scotland, Northern Ireland, 9-10 degrees. But for England and Wales, the teens quite widely, and maybe up as high as 16, possibly even 17 degrees across parts of the east. Much of England and Wales staying dry and fine through this evening, but the rain will spread through Belfast, through the central belt of Scotland as well, so turning quite damp here overnight. Some mist and fog is likely across the south. Temperatures holding up at 6, 7, 8 degrees Celsius. It will turn colder as the skies start to clear in the northwest later on. And a brighter day here to come tomorrow, although we could start with a touch of frost and certainly some fog for Northern Ireland. A different day for England and Wales, much more cloud, line of rain spreading southwards and some heavy rain likely over the Midlands, parts of southern England at times. Some uncertainty about exactly